Hello and welcome, it's Chris from Christopher Hole Training. Welcome to this week's tutorial. The subject is 4 exercises to reduce lordosis. Obviously the aim that we're looking at is I'm going to be teaching you 4 exercises that will help you reduce lordosis. There's going to be 2 areas of the body that we're going to be focusing on, and we're going to focus on that in the 2 anatomy fundamentals, and it's the lumbar spine and the pelvis. What's then going to happen is we're going to go through the 4 exercises where I'm going to go through some teaching points, some potential technique flaws, and how to progress the exercise. Now, in some respects, the 4 exercises that I'm going to be talking about are the progression. So as we go through, you'll see the progression and how to be able to manage and how to be able to progress the 4 exercises that I'm going to be talking you through. But before we get into that, I just quickly want to talk about my social media. So please do come along, like and follow. You can come to Twitter, which is at Christopher Hole, Facebook, Christopher Hole Training, and Instagram, Christopher Hole. So please do come along there, like and follow. It'd be great to have you there. Alternatively, just click subscribe to the YouTube channel and you'll get more of these videos that I'm doing each week. Another one, come to the website, christopherholetraining.com. If you follow this link here, you go straight through to the 4 best stretches for lordosis. So what you can do is you can combine what you learn here and what you learn from this free download, and you can combine that into a little mini workout. So you can do that most days. So you'll have 4 exercises, you'll have 4 stretches that you can start doing to help manage your lordosis. And then onward from that, you can find out more about the 12-week programs that I offer at christopherholetraining.com. So coming back to today's topic, which is the 4 exercises to reduce lordosis, let's get stuck into the anatomy. To help you understand what the 4 exercises do and how they work, first of all, I just want to quickly talk about these 2 points, if you will, or 2 fundamentals. So the first thing that we want to be focusing on when we are sort of conducting or doing these 4 exercises to help reduce lordosis is point number 1, which is flatten the lumbar curve. As you can see here, you've got a normal curve, which is in this picture, and then you've got an exaggerated lumbar curve, which is in the picture next to it, which you can see is a much more tighter curve in the lumbar spine. So number 1, we want to be flattening that. Point 2 is we want to be leveling the hips. So as you can see here, what's generally closely related to lumbar lordosis, so you've got your sort of natural curve here that goes up through the spine, and then if we come over to here, we've got the lordotic or exaggerated lordotic curve going through the lumbar spine there. Now, what's closely related to that, it's not necessarily exclusive to it, but what we tend to find is an anterior pelvic tilt that comes with it. So as you can see here, you've got the angle, which is quite a steep angle, whereas here it's not completely level like a spirit level. There is a slight angle to it because of the points that we use on the pelvis, but you can see the curve or the steepness of the angle is a lot less. So what we want to be doing is we want to be pulling this end down and this end up. So these are the 2 things that we want to be focusing on: lumbar curve or flattening it, and then leveling up the hips. Leveling up the hips will, to some degree, flatten the spine. The 2 areas of the body that we're going to be focusing on is the abdominals and the glutes. So the abdominals are here, and you might be able to see there is a bit of a protrusion of the abdomen here, whereas this side, it's a lot flatter. So we want to be using the abdominals to flatten, which will help flatten that curve. And then we want to be activating the glute muscles, which are, again, here. These tend to protrude out, but when we can tighten them, what we get is that flattened lumbar curve, a flattened abdomen, and a flattened sort of gluteal area. And that's the area that we're trying to focus on. So without going into any great depth about the muscles and how they work and what they want to be doing, all we want to focus on is when we are doing the exercises, these are the 2 things that we want to be focusing on. Activating here and activating here. So what we can then do is flatten here and level here. Excuse the not so straight line. So these are the things that we're going to be focusing on when we do these exercises. And this is the reason why I've chosen these 4 exercises, because it gives you the best opportunity to be able to maximize the flattening of the lumbar curve and the leveling of the hips. So what we'll do is we'll get straight into exercise number 1. With all 4 of these exercises, we want to start simple and slowly make it a little more complex. So what we've got here, exercise number 1, is just simply muscle activation. Very simple. You can see I'm led on the floor here. I've got my knees bent and my feet are flat on the floor. So this is how I start. Now what you might find is that you've got quite a curve in your lumbar spine here. So you can take your hand and you can put it under your back and you can just feel the gap. Because what we then want to do is tighten the abdominals, tighten the gluteal muscles, and what that will do is that will begin to flatten the pelvis, flatten the spine and rotate the pelvis. So what we're trying to do is with our abdominals here, so we're engaging and activating the abdominals, we are activating the gluteal muscles with the idea to flatten through here. So what you should be able to feel is a bit more compression on the top of the hand by the spine, because you might find that there's a bit of a gap between the top of the hand and the spine. So by activating through abdominals and then activating through gluteals, you might find that that either gap becomes less or you begin to compress down onto the top of the hand. So with regards to exercise number 1, it's just simply getting into this position and then just activating the muscles, because this is the easiest position for you to be able to activate those muscles. Because what we're going to start to do next is we're going to start building on top of that. What I generally find, if I was to do an exercise that's too complex for someone, they won't be able to feel the muscle activation, they won't be able to feel the spine flattening, and they'll just be trying to focus on holding the position or holding the movement. So what we want to be able to do is take away all the extra, let's just say, stimulus, and just focus on abdominals and gluteals. So really, once you can feel these 2 areas activating, then you can move on to exercise number 2, which is hip thrust and shoulder bridge. So with regards to exercise number 2, you want to start with, I guess, sort of 2A and 2B, if you will. So you've got the hip thrust, which is 2A, and then you've got the shoulder bridge, which is 2B. Now, with regards to the teaching points, they are exactly the same. So you've got tighten the abdominals, tighten the gluteal muscles, with the idea then of flattening the curve and rotating the pelvis. So you start in this position. Now, the next thing is to bring your hips, because they are in what is called hip flexion here, so you've got an angle here, so this is the angle of hip flexion of, say, let's just say 120 degrees. What we're now going to do is we're going to extend the hip. Now this may make it harder to A, tighten the abdominals, and B, tighten the gluteal muscles, and therefore make it harder to flatten the spinal curve and rotate the pelvis. So where we've mastered it here, what we then aim to do is activate abdominals and activate glutes here, flatten this curve off slightly, and then we lift the hips. Now what I recommend you do is you start with a hip thrust. So what you'll do is you won't necessarily come to, say, full extension, which is 180 degrees if we look at the hip here. What you might do is you just extend until you've got a slight bend at your hip. Again, still focusing on abdominals, gluteals, and keeping this position. What you then do is you might hold that for a second, and then go back down. So with regards to the hip thrust, we might be looking at, say, 8 reps. Holding the position and making sure abdominals and gluteals are active. Again, if you want to, you can keep your palm or the back of your hand on the lumbar spine to see if it begins to arch. Because the final thing to do is, as you lift your hips, is to maintain the flattened curve. Because what you might find is that as you lift, you go back to that sort of exaggerated lordotic curve. So you would only go as high as that flattened spine will allow you. And then what you start to do, you use the 4 best stretches for lordosis to extend the muscles of the hip, to lengthen them, so you can then extend that bit further until you get to 180 degrees. That's kind of the goal. So you would, first of all, you would use the hip thrust by doing 8 reps and just extending at the hip. What you can then do is move on to 2B, which is the shoulder bridge. So what you might do, you do exactly the same with regards to the teaching points, but this time you just come up and hold. So you're holding in that 180 degree position, so fully extended hip. That's the kind of thing that you're looking for from the shoulder bridge. So with regards to the first 2 exercises, these are the types of things that you want to be using. Then with, as I've mentioned before, with these stretches, with these exercises, you want to be using these stretches, because what these stretches will allow you to do is extend the hip further. So you can go further into the hip thrust and hold the shoulder bridge in the 180 degree or straight line through shoulder, hip and knee. So with regards to exercises 1 and 2, first of all, we're looking at muscle activation in a very simple position. Then we're looking to take muscle activation to, in a sense, the next level, which is then extending the hip. What we're now going to do is go on to exercises 3 and 4. Exercises 3 and 4 is now coming up into a vertical position. So as you can see here, I'm on both knees, and here I'm on one knee. Now, with regards to exercise 3, it's just simply tall kneeling or kneeling. And then exercise 4 is half kneeling or kneeling on one leg. Now, the reason we're doing that is because muscles will act differently in a horizontal or shoulder bridge or lying position than they will in a vertical position. So what we're essentially doing here is a vertical bridge. So we're using the kneeling position in a vertical bridge, because as you can see, I've still got a bend at my knee and I've got that 180 degree at my hip. So what I'm doing is I'm still coming into this position. So I now start, once I can get into this position, so again, teaching points are the same. Flatten through here, engage or activate through here to flatten off the curve and rotate the pelvis. But what we're now doing is we're now trying to do that, in a sense, in the vertical bridge position. So only really come up to this position when you can get to 180 degrees in the shoulder bridge. Because what you might find is that you've got a slight bend. This was exaggerating, but you might have a slight bend through your hips. But what we want to be doing is we want to be extending that little bit further so we can get into that sort of full 180 degree extension or position, if you will. Now, by doing it on both knees, what we're able to do is we're able to use both glutes, so right and left glute, to be able to engage together. So we'll always do that with the abdominals because, in a sense, although there is one side to the other, they tend to engage at the same time. What we would then do with both the glutes is we would squeeze those. Now again, we want to watch the hamstring activation. So if we go back to the shoulder bridge, something I didn't mention, which is we want to be trying to minimize the amount the hamstrings activate. And we want to be trying to make sure it goes into the hips and into the glutes. So with regards to the teaching points, they're the same. We tighten the abdominals, we tighten the gluteals. The aim is to flatten the curve and rotate the pelvis. So what you might find here is that your pelvis now is starting to loosen. It's starting to become more flexible. Again, we are still using these 4 stretches to be able to maximize and get the most out of these exercises. What we would then do, once we can again get into this 180-degree position in the kneeling position, we would then come into this half kneeling position for the main reason that it's asymmetrical. So we are again tightening the abdominals, but this time we're just tightening one glute muscle. So with the leg that's down, it would be that glute. We're still engaging abdominals and to some degree the obliques. So we're still engaging those, but now we're engaging one glute and we are managing and flattening that curve in the spine. So we're still doing the flattening of the curve in the spine and the rotating of the pelvis. Generally, if you go straight onto this one, this isn't the case for everyone because some people have better, let's just say, sort of muscular awareness, if you will. But what I generally find is that if people go straight into this position, they find it hard to do these two, which then negates doing these two. So you might find that you can go straight into exercise 3 or exercise 2, but these are the 4 exercises as a progression to go all the way through. So it's very much working through these as a process, and with each stage that you go along, use these 4 stretches to be able to maximize these exercises. Because what we want to be focusing on, certainly when we go from the lying position to the kneeling position, is sort of re-engaging those muscles because they will react differently in a vertical position to a horizontal position. So hopefully this has made a little bit more sense. Hopefully it's given you a little strategy, a little plan, and a little mini workout that you can do with these 4 exercises and these 4 stretches. So again, just go along to the website, pop your name and email address in, and it will just download straight into your inbox. You can start them straight away. You've got these 4 exercises. You just do the 4 stretches first, or you can do 1 exercise, 1 stretch, 1 exercise, 1 stretch, 1 exercise, 1 stretch. However you feel best that you want to do it, you just pop them together, because what we want to do is we want to loosen off the muscles of the hip here, and we want to start activating the muscles of the hip here and here. And what this will do, this will give you a more sort of flexible, supple hip, so you're able to, number 1, flatten the curve of your spine, and number 2, rotate the pelvis. So hopefully this has been helpful. Many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from Christoph Hole Training. I'll speak to you in the next video.